In today's video we're going to be jumping into some more Monster Hunter Wilds, and this time I'll be going over everything you need to know about the new Artian weapons. These things can be absolutely awesome with the right setup and are some of the most powerful weapons in the game. I'll be going over everything you need to know, some hints and tips, and why you'll probably be using these at endgame to tackle some of the toughest foes. Now with Artian weapons, you're not going to have to worry about these too early on in the game, as you're not going to encounter any parts from them until after chapter 4 when you start to encounter your frenzied and then tempered enemies. And if we jump over to our trusty blacksmith gemma, you're going to notice that all of the kind of favourite setup of the previous Monster Hunter games are here, where you'll be using all of the resources of the captured enemies or defeated monsters that you've been tackling, and you'll be able to create some truly powerful weapons and armour. As always, you're going to want to be trying to get as high rarity as possible on these, and as you proceed to the very last stages of the game and start tackling the toughest foes, you'll be able to unlock some really tasty gear. But as with everything, you're going to have to make sure they've got some really nice stats on them, and you'll be after as high attack, affinity, the right element, as well as some good decoration slots, and of course you're also going to want some good skills on it. Sometimes this can really narrow down the field you're looking for. Artian weapons are an amazing option for this, as honestly they just have the most customization going. So this time, rather than going at our standard crafting, we're going to go over to our Artian crafting, and this time you're going to be using these weapon shards or fragments that you've been acquiring as you've been defeating some of the toughest monsters. Each one of your weapons is going to take certain pieces that you're going to want to slot in over on the left hand side here, and you'll want to be piling these up as high as possible because you're going to be crafting quite a few times over. Now if we bop over to our melding area, one thing that you should definitely know about these weapon shards or fragments is that when these are in their unidentified form, they're going to be one tier rarity lower than when they're identified, so you'll have them as 5, 6s and 7s. However, when you do actually acquire the loot and you identify them, they're going to go one grade higher, so they'll be the 6, 7s and 8s. Also, as soon as you can get the 8s, you really should focus on them, because the others will kind of become a little bit on the insignificant side. Now the great thing about this, as you start to go up in tiers, eventually when you hit tier 8 and use them to actually create an Artian weapon, this is going to give you lots of free tier decorations on that weapon. Whereas as far as I'm aware, I don't think you can actually get this on any of the standard kind of monster weapons currently in the game. Also, you'll be able to customise them amazingly and determine how much affinity and attack you actually want to put on them. Honestly though, looking over their slots, these can be a real game changer in late game, as you'll be able to put any of those tier 3 decorations in, and of course if you wanted to put a 2 or a 1 in, you could definitely do that as well. But lots of times you're going to try and get as many 3s in as possible, as they're going to give you the kind of most bang for your buck. Now when you're creating these weapons, one thing I would say is that you're probably going to want to focus mainly on one thing. So for example, if you were going to be going for an affinity build, say you were doing like a dual wield setup, you're going to want to be going for the same elemental type, and you're going to want to be going for all the same stat boost. For example, affinity, affinity and affinity on all 3 of the pieces you'll be placing in ready to forge. You can mix and match of course if you haven't got the right ones, but ultimately it's going to mean you get slightly less stats overall. So trying to make sure you've got the same element type and trying to hit a lot of the same bonuses, for example 3 attacks or 3 affinity, almost always works out best and in your favour. Now one trick I would definitely recommend is that when you are creating these, the boost that can be set up on them when you're doing your reinforcing is actually predetermined and kind of set in stone. So if it was me, the first thing I would do would be to save your game before you've actually started crafting and such. Probably get a pen and paper. It's a little bit old school, but that's what I've been doing, and from here what you can actually do is try to create the perfect weapon. Now this might sound odd, but the way they've done it in the game, when you do craft a weapon, then the actual bonus stats that you're going to get on it are already predetermined. So for example, if we look at these dual wield daggers just here, once I'm going in and upgrading it to maximum, giving myself 5 overall stat boosts to it, they're going to be shown up just on the right hand side here. This time we've got a bit of a mixed bag. It's not an amazing one whatsoever, because we've kind of hit a little bit of everything. We've got elemental boost, sharpness boost, attack boost, affinity boost and sharpness boost again. Personally, I actually like one sharpness boost on these, because otherwise you run out of that very quickly on these Artian weapons, but the rest of them I really would have liked a lot more affinity if possible, or barring that, attack would have also been really nice. However, the cool thing now is that you could actually back straight out of the actual game without saving. So if we go back straight out, make sure you're not saving, because otherwise you're going to be kind of screwed. You're just going to return to the main menu. Then when you come back in, whatever you're crafting for that actual weapon type is going to have those exact same stats again. So here we are, and we've created a completely different one. Different pieces were put into the slots. As you can see, we've got the exact same stat, because like I said, it's predetermined. However, what you can do is when you do go into craft the next time, instead of that you're going to do one beforehand, and this one would have taken all of those stats that we saw. Then you're going to create another weapon, which will be the one that you want perfectly set up, and this time when you fully upgrade it, it's going to give you completely different stats, and these would be your second stats. Again, any weapon you make on that second time is going to have these stats on it. You can do this for as many times as you want. This can work out really well if you're trying to get a perfect roll on a weapon, even though it does take a lot of resources and it is a little bit of trial and error. Or just go with the old fashioned way, create one. If you don't like it, you can always dismantle it and you'll lose those weapon parts, but you will keep all of your upgrade materials, which are actually quite hard to get hold of. Then if you wanted to, you can just make the next weapon and just keep going in that fashion. Now if you're thinking that's absolutely great, but how exactly do I manage to get hold of all this stuff? Seems like an absolute abundance of effort. Then there's quite a few ways to get hold of things. First way, if you speak to Natter, he's going to give you some resources that you'll be able to pick up as the festival resources as you're playing the game, and these are always worth grabbing because they're essential upgrade materials for your weapons. If you're after even more ways to get hold of these materials, then I'd highly recommend some of the higher ranked hunts, such as ones with Tempered Arcveld, as if you're able to get his gem, or actually any gem in general, you'll be able to turn them in over at the basin for a whole bunch of points you can change into upgrade materials. Going over to the basin, and you'll see that these are actually quite expensive, so you're definitely going to need some saving up, but as long as you're turning in your monster parts, you should be able to get hold of quite a few of these very regularly. Heading over to Suja, Peaks of Accord, and if we just go straight over to our melder just this way, then you'll see that this is a fantastic way of getting hold of all those weapon fragments. Again, it is quite expensive, but you should definitely have some options available to yourself, and if you're able to, getting hold of one of these golden relic tickets can really help you out, as you'll be able to get a whole bunch of the best materials very fast this way. Previously, you were able to do this by obtaining Nightflower Pollen, then hand it in at Natter, and you may want to tap Nightflower Pollen farm into YouTube to see if it's still a viable option, but I believe they're going to patch it out soon, so I'm not going to go into that process too much. But whatever way you can, use materials that you've got or don't need, and you'll be able to grab some nice goodies here. As well as that, high ranked hunts are great for rewarding these weapon fragments, and if possible, I would definitely say try to hunt the top end monsters when you've got a nice build going, especially the hunts that have two at once, as these kind of give you the most weapon relic pieces overall. Now if I was going to weigh up the pros and cons for these as Artian weapons, I'd say the pros definitely far outweigh the cons, because you can get some absolutely fantastic stats on these, especially I'd say for the elemental side. These tend to be most times best for elemental builds overall, because of all the bonus stats you can have applied to them.
It's over 9,000!
In fact, the damage on these weapons is amazing. Obviously, if you wanted to go down the route of elemental or affinity, that also works really well, as well as raw damage if you're after that on a weapon. It's definitely hard to pass these weapons up because they have just such a great amount of customization. Overall, these Artian weapons have so much going for them, it's really hard to pick them apart and say where their real downfall is, but there is one major one that I just have to bring up. So currently my major gripe with these Artian weapons is one thing in general, and it's nothing to do with the damage they dish out or anything really about the upgrading of them whatsoever. However, one thing I have noticed is that when we go over and look at our actual weapons that we can craft from our monster tree, as always, a lot of these look absolutely awesome. Style is always a massive thing in games such as this when you spend a lot of time in them, and currently you can actually change and layer the looks of your armour, but with your weapons they're currently set in stone. The monster weapons look awesome, some of them look a bit better than others, but some look incredible. And then we're going to go over to our Artian weapons, and these things look absolutely awful. I haven't found one that looks good yet, because they all just look so bland and really boring overall. And then when you go to fight, they don't look much better either. But yeah, just one minor gripe from me, the fact that they look kind of awful. But other than that, the stats, the damage, the customization is all absolutely top tier. So no doubt in my mind, most people will be using these in almost all situations except for a few, than the monster weapons you'll currently be creating in the tree. But yeah, hopefully that's helped a few of you guys and girls out and it's all a little bit clearer now. As always, there'll be a lot more content away from me. For now, take care. I'll see you on the next day.